Now I want to thank Rich Wolfanger. Rich is having to try to complete the project of building the ice house that Chris Blackmar started on our Saturday show. And Chris has been his partner in doing the series on Saturdays. And now that Chris is in the hospital and not able to continue with us right now, Rich volunteered to complete the projects on our Wednesday show. Now, because we're having to add these to the Wednesday show, and we hadn't anticipated this, our shows are going to be running a little longer than normal. But we think that that's worthwhile in order for everybody to be able to complete the building of the ice house that Chris Blackmar started. So, Rich, thank you so much for doing this. I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Jim. What I'd like to first say is I was under the assumption that I was building this ice house on here following Chris's method, of course, but it's not just for newbie modelers. There's a lot of experienced modelers who are currently on this program. So there's nothing I can really teach them. It's just the newer people that are beginning to model, which would be more acquainted to this type of instruction. But I'm not really trying to show how to build something. I'm just going to show you how I do certain aspects of my modeling. And you have determined that I could have 4 more sessions to complete my model, which is fine. Tonight I was going to show actually how I constructed the board and batten roofing on my ice house, only because I never formally showed it before. So what I basically do is I take my strip wood, these are 2x8s, and I have a plumber's steel bristle brush. You can find those in the plumbing section of your hardware store for a couple of bucks. And they have really sharp bristles on those, and they dig quite well into the soft strip wood. And I use those to banish both sides of my wood. First on this side and then the other side, but I tape my wood so it doesn't move around when I do that. It's a lot easier to handle, and you wouldn't want to get that bristle brush against your fingers. So I do both sides of my wood. Okay, you can show the third picture. And when I dig in the heavy wood grain, I use some alcohol, and I just lost my power. Just a minute. All right. I lost my light anyway. I use alcohol and powders on this to help darken the wood somewhat, keeping a brown patina that I wanted for the rooftop. And after using that steel bristle brush, the powder actually goes into the wood and darkens it somewhat. And then I go over this afterwards with a light sandpaper. The brown powders and alcohol actually help to darken that wood somewhat. And then I'm ready to do my next part. You can go to the next screen, please. Okay, this shows the scratches I made in with that brush. You can see those quite well. And another reason for doing this all together is when certain woods don't get much brownness, I take the whole bunch of sticks and jumble them all up. And I don't even look at when I'm grabbing one to glue another one on. I don't care if the next one next to a dark one is a light one, or you get 2 dark ones in a row. It doesn't matter. It just makes a better looking roof. Next one. Okay, this is where I put on the right side of this is where that water tank goes, and the left side is my condenser area on top. The left side is a light brown patina. The right side is a greenish effect because I had used Floquil pine stain. And when I did that, it was too dark green, I mentioned last time. And then I went over it with that bristle brush again, just to lighten that somewhat, because I wanted to make the wood underneath the water tank appear that the water tank had leaked at some point and was a little mossy there, but it didn't turn out quite well as I had hoped. But I will finish this weathering on my final show, because I will incorporate that into what I do for my scenery on the last show. You can go to the next one, please. This just shows the other side of the building. Here you can see that that green was more enhanced than the other side of the building. But I'll make sure to fix this before we get to the final step. And you can see that slider door I put on. Next one. Okay, I just showed this slide the other day, but I showed it again because you can see that you don't need peaked wood inside where that condenser is going to go, because it won't be seen. I put it on the other end of the building, and on this lower end of the building, I had to put a little piece. And this was before I had all my battens on the right lower corner. But I just showed this so that you don't need to do that peak in there. You can leave it out. Go ahead. This I use Formula 560 to glue my battens on. You can use any type of glue you want. You can use Titebond. You could use Elmer's glue. You could use anything, but this is what I use because it grabs quite readily. And this also works for headlights on vehicles as well. Next one. Okay, that was the brakes I put in the battens because that's where my tank sits. And then I used that plastic sprue that I'm colored brown to use for my water tank spout or water tank inlet pipe. Next one. This is just before I glued on that spout to my tank. And you can see where I did put on the nuts, bolts, and washers on those support boards at the bottom of the tank platform. Next one. And that's after I glued that on. And I'm leaving this with 5 bands. And I forgot last week I mentioned that those tank supports for the bands, they're called water tank hoops. But we had a slight discussion about how many bands to put on this tank. I had 7 on there originally. I took 2 off. I think a 5 looks just about right. Most of the tanks I've seen in real life have about 5 tanks, and this tank is 6 feet tall. Okay, and the next one. Okay, Jim, I'm going to go a little bit different now, and we're going to take a little bit of a detour here. The reason why I'm going to show this base is next show I want to go into foundations and docks. But in order for me to determine the depth of my foundation, I had to start with a base. And all the while I'm building this, I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do with this model when I'm done? Am I going to build it just to put it on a shelf? No. Am I going to incorporate it in my layout? No, because I don't have a layout. Am I going to put it on a shelf layout? Maybe. I'd like to make one. So most modelers I know build their models on a board that they determine the real estate they're putting around their building, and then they take that board and incorporate it into a spot on their layout and then blend the scenery in around the edges of those boards. And if you're going to take this model to a show when you're done, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pick it up, take it with you, set it on a contest table. So it's nice to have a nice scenic board around your building to be able to show that building off. So this is 1-inch thick pink insulation board that I got at Home Depot. The reason why it's cut in half was I wanted to slope this driveway from the upper left-hand corner. You can see its lowest point to the upper or to the middle right side of your screen. That's the high point. And in order to get there, I had to cut insertions into this insulation board with an X-Acto knife, only about an inch wide at the time, and then try to cut it in without destroying my insulation board. And you can go to the, well, before you go to the next picture, you can see the foundation that I made for my main ice house building on the stone foundation there. And there's about a 4-foot in HO scale reveal from the upper ground to the top of that foundation. And on the drawings that I drew for the ice house that are uploaded to the New Tracks Modeling website shows a 2-foot high foundation. I made mine a little taller because after using this 1-inch thick insulation board, actually it's 6 scale feet in HO thickness. I'm going to set another building on that square that I drew to the left. And in between those two buildings, I want to build an ice chute to transfer ice made in one building to the other building as a cold storage unit. And to do that, I had to have some elevation there. So next time when I do the docks, I will show my ice chute. I'll have that made by then. You can go to the next one. This just shows that from another direction, just to show you that driveway is on a slope. Next photo. Okay, that's just a foundation where, here's another thing. I'm not going to glue this foundation to my board. And the reason why I'm not going to glue it is if I do a good job on this model, I would hate it if I had it glued to this board. Because if I want to put this on a special place, maybe I don't want my building glued and I'll destroy it trying to get it out of there. And since it's down into a crevice like you would see in a real house being built, that'd be hard to do. Now this picture shows this, next picture. This picture shows the bottom baseboard that I'm using here. Normally I would use 3/4 inch plywood to do my models on, but lately I've been using gator board, and this is 3/16 of an inch thick. It's a foam in the middle, but it's a light wood veneer on both sides. You could take a piece of this stuff and leave it out in the rain and it's not going to warp on you. So with that in mind, you can do all sorts of wetness on it with alcohol and ink, stains, paint, or whatever you want, and it's never going to warp. Not like that black foam stuff that warps, that because that has paper on both sides that's black. You guys have seen that. And then I painted the edge of that insulation board with brown earthen Jasania paints here to make it look like it was excavated. Okay, next one. Okay, this is the brick that I'm using. It's aged brick sidewalks that I bought from Downtown Deco, Randy Peprock. And they come in a 5x8 inch poured brick section, and you can, and I cut those up through the center. So those are about 2 inches wide. And I cut that up for my driveway for that model. And that's one coat of downtown, or it's one coat of Deco Art Georgia clay. And I have a friend over on the railroad line that uses burnt umber stain after that to make it red brick color. I had a heck of a time doing it myself. So I ended up using some heritage brick, and you can see that in the next photo. Here I painted some heritage brick over that, and then I messaged my friend and I said, do you still use alcohol and ink over these paints? And he said, no. He said, the reason why I don't is because the alcohol and ink is too wet for paint that's not really cured well enough, and it moves the paint around too much. And then if you have that happen, he says, you'll see that Georgia clay coat underneath. So I decided not to do it here. And what I did do later was I took some brown ink stain wash and used that instead, but only in light sections and in very random areas, not over the whole thing. So eventually next week, I'm going to have an ice chute between these two buildings. Now you see this building on the left is not weathered yet, and that's that 65-pound cheap paper I used. I really wouldn't want to ruin those wooden shingles. So what I plan on doing is I have a mentor as well, and that was Brian Nolan. He's passed away, but Brian used to use a shingle stain made with Floquil paint. I plan on trying to use most of his colors in powders rather than in wet. So what I'm going to do is try to color that roof using powders because they are dry and see what I can come up with. Now I'm going to have to experiment with that. I'll do that this week and we'll come back and show you what I find. So,
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rick. We'll be looking forward to seeing you again next week to finish up this part of it.
all right. Thank you.
Thank
May I
you.
ask a question, Jim, real quick?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Rich about the canopy glue. Is that anything like the Tester's Window Maker cement? Can you use it the same way?
No, you can actually use it to glue metal.
I think he's
Metal.
breaking up. Alan, I think Rick is breaking up right now because of the storm going through where he is. So we'll have to
You
get
can actually,
have to
you can
get your
actually use that you can use that to glue metal with. I don't think it's meant to put on windows like gallery glass, not like that. It's just a glue.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Rich. We really appreciate it.